Hey, good afternoon. Thank you for being here today. My name is Keith Hall. I'm a registered CRES, CHTM. I've been in biomed since forever, it seems like. Today's class is Shaping the Future, the path from BMET to CRES. And we're going to talk a little bit about the purpose that we're here for this session today. These are some of the topics that we're going to cover. And what I hope that you'll be able to take away is a clear understanding of imaging career pathway, some steps that you can take back to your organization and internalize for helping develop a program like this, and some resources to support those imaging skills and what that certification path looks like. So this is my background. Joined the Army back in the late 90s as a regular old biomed, went through school at Shepherd Air Force Base. First duty assignment was a hospital. I was lucky enough to get my hands on equipment early. And from there, I moved around, did a couple of different things. And then about 10 years into my pathway in the Army, you have a decision to make. You can kind of stay technical as much as you possibly can, or you can take more of a leadership track and focus on Army operations. So I was fortunate enough to be selected to attend a specialty program called Training with Industry. And what that meant was I was able to move to Cleveland, Ohio in partnership with Philips and work at their campus as a CT instructor for a full year. And then my follow-on assignments were all related to imaging or running a shop in different capacities. Then COVID came and I retired from the Army in the spring of 2020, and I went to go work for an independent service organization named Renovo. And I worked at the University of Utah there in Salt Lake City as a account director for a couple of years, and naturally progressed up to become a regional director of operations, or director of service, I guess is the correct term, for imaging for the western about third of the United States. In that role, I sort of oversaw, mapped, developed service plans, strategies, escalations for our imaging service business. And just last month, I resigned from Renovo and took a job at Intelas doing almost the exact same thing. My technical role is diagnostic imaging analyst. I've been there for going on 5 weeks now, and it's great. Okay, so the first slide up is the transition pathway. I want to preface what you can read on this slide by saying a few things. Our talent pool is getting smaller as it relates to imaging service engineers. And at least in America, the demand is increasing. And this trend has been happening for years, and it continues to trend in that direction where the talent pool is getting smaller due to folks aging out or transitioning to a different career, or simply that our pipelines into this career are not the diameter of the pipeline is not large enough to bring in enough engineers to compete with the demand for that talent. So that puts us in a situation, I say our career field. Almost everything I talk about here will be from like the 30,000-foot view, looking strategically at imaging service engineers on at least a national level. And puts our career field in a buy it or build it type of situation in this economy, where if you are at a hospital and you need an imaging service engineer, you can go to the market. But here's a good example. Let's say there's, and these are made up numbers, let's say there's 100 imaging service engineer positions open if you went to Indeed or LinkedIn today. And then you went to see how many folks are applying for those. You might find 7, 15 imaging service engineers looking for work. There's a severe shortage. So what do you do when you can't buy the talent because it's not available? Well, you have to build it. Okay, building it is the more difficult choice because it takes time to build an imaging service engineer. Anybody have an idea, if you had to estimate how long it would take somebody who was a Biomed 2, really good aptitude for learning, all they needed to do was learn the various imaging modalities. How long do you think it would take from the beginning of that? Say again. An imaging service engineer that's capable to do first look on any modality.
3 to 5 years?
Yeah.
For general rad?
Yeah, I landed at about 3 years for general rad for. Yeah, that's right. Yep, linear accelerators are on the high end of the spectrum, ultrasound systems at the low end, everything else kind of falls in between. You can take a biomed, I think, my opinion is biomed should be supporting ultrasound right now, anyhow. But, you know, C-arms, portable systems, those are pretty, they're less complex. They're more complex than maybe an infusion pump or a hospital bed. But I think the learning curve to get to there is a lot quicker than to get into MR, CT, cath lab. Okay, so now let's get back to this slide that says here that the first step is to identify candidates for this transition. What does that mean? That means you're gonna look at your resource pool, the people that are candidates that are ready to transition to imaging, and they've got to have some knowledge, skills, and attributes. Anybody want to take a stab at listing one knowledge, skill, or attribute that somebody going into imaging ought to have? Got to be able to listen. That's what I heard you say. Anybody else? That's a good one.
Attention to detail.
Attention to detail. Okay. Problem solving, of course. What'd you say, Wes?
Understanding of like networking.
Networking. Yep, for sure. Those are all very good. What about sense of urgency? Do you think the sense of urgency in imaging is the same as it is in biomed? Typically not. Typically not. I think if you lose an infusion pump, it goes down and you have 600 of them in the facility, they can work around that. But if your ER CT goes down, the entire hospital goes on divert. And now somebody who's in a car accident in front of the hospital can't go to that hospital. They got to go somewhere else 45 minutes away. They may die. Okay, so it's serious stuff. So the sense of urgency in imaging is real, it's palpable, and it has visibility up through and to the C-suite of those organizations. So they need to be able to work independently. Good call out. So we need to foster that desire. Somebody is a biomed and says out loud to their supervisor or their manager, they say, hey, I'd love to get into imaging. I really want to make a lot more money. That's the time to have the conversation with them about, you understand what comes with this. So as we are identifying those folks and we make it important in our organizations to that, being in imaging comes with a certain, a step above, if you will. We got to figure out how we're going to get these folks trained. Okay, and there's a couple of ways you can go about that. Again, I'm looking at our industry from a 30,000-foot view. We have service providers in typically about 3 categories, right? Folks that work at the original equipment manufacturer, they work directly for Siemens, Philips, GE, whatever. You have folks that work at the independent service organizations, right? The Intelas, the Renovos, et cetera. And then you have service engineers that work directly for the healthcare facility. We call that in-house. You guys may already know that, but I thought I'd just talk it through real fast. So those alignments will determine where you can get your training from. Because the OEM typically will not train third party, right? You can't go, if you work for a big ISO, you cannot go to Philips and get trained anymore. If you work for the OEM, they're going to guarantee your training because they own the equipment, they own the schoolhouse, they're going to send you to school. And if you work for the hospital, it's typical that you can go to school through the OEM, and a well-run HTM program will ensure that documentation and training courses, et cetera, are all included in the contract at the point of sale during the purchase, the capital purchase. So that's the OEM training. Anybody else know where else you can get training?
Third party.
Third party? Got an example, anyone?
RSTI.
RSTI, that's a big one. They've been doing it for a lot of years. So if you're a biomed and you want to go into imaging, RSTI has a program with multiple phases, and it helps to transition somebody from biomed into imaging. Does anybody else have a program like that?
CBET?
Yep, CBET, College of Biomedical Equipment Technology. Also, Tri Imaging has a course like that. Okay. All right, so those are a couple of the BMET to imaging transition courses. There are also device-specific courses that you can take. You go through All Parts Medical and get some training on a specific, like OECC arms, just throwing examples out there. You travel down to their schoolhouse in Tennessee, you spend a week, maybe 2 weeks there, you get all trained up, you come back, now you know how to work on it, and you get a little certificate of completion to put in your personnel file so that you can qualify your competence during audits. There's another way that we can get training for our BMETs that go into imaging, or for our junior imaging folks that want to develop. Anybody think of what the other way is? We talked about OEM and third party.
OJT.
On the job training. So that could be, hey, you're with me, Kurt. Today we're going to go work on the CT. I'm really good at CT. You haven't seen it before. I'm going to walk you through it. We're going to do a PM together. And over time, with doing stuff like that, Kurt will begin to get knowledge and build his confidence. You can do that prior to sending them to a school. The other way is for organizations to develop their own training platform, right? And typically a hospital wouldn't be the right type of organization to do this. But I know there's ISOs out there in the world that develop their own training and they send their own employees to go get schooled up. So we kind of talked about the second half of this slide. Why does it matter? Our aging workforce is, retiring out of the career field. We have a need for imaging techs, and it's a career development as a biomed to move into imaging, to kind of specialize. So this whole presentation talks about a couple of different things. One is transitioning from biomed into imaging. The other kind of half of this presentation talks about, once you're in imaging, how do you chase and obtain that CRES certification? Okay, CRES is Certified Radiology Equipment Specialist. It's offered by AMI, administered through ACI. It recognizes imaging folks that have advanced knowledge and skill working on imaging equipment. Those individuals that are certified demonstrate expertise in all of these various modalities here. We've got radiology, fluoroscopy, mammo, CT, MR, and ultrasound. Strong foundations in safety, regulatory compliance, clinical applications. It's a nice feather to put in your cap if you're in the industry, and this is the sort of thing that you do. How do you get CRES? Well, typically you study for it, and then you take the test, and if you study well, you'll pass it. There are different training programs, much like we just talked about. You can have an internal training program, OJT, meaning somebody in your organization that has obtained the CRES that kind of helps you study. I didn't know the right way to spell that out, so I just put OJT. OEM training, ISO training. Mentorship approaches, choosing the right mentor and mentee. So it's clear to me now that this slide was talking about how do we develop our ISEs once they transition, not about CRES. Structured development program means making a intentional effort to have a plan, all right? Not just winging it, not just saying, hey, Wes, you've been really kicking butt, you seem really motivated. Tomorrow I want to make you an ISE 1, you were a BMET 3. I know that you're not, I'm just saying this example, right? We're going to put you as an ISE 1, and good luck, man, you got this. That's when you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Anybody heard that before? So having a great plan is going to lead to great success. So you want to have a mentor. Choose the right mentor or mentee. We talked about folks aging out. So this ties into succession planning. You got a very experienced imaging service engineer with, I don't know, 40 years of experience, and retirement's just around the corner for them. They went to school on vacuum tubes and analog circuits and adjusting the actual legs of the transformer. And now we live in a digital world, right? And things are quite different. So that imaging service engineer with all that experience may have potentially developed some bad habits along the way, right? Talking about that cranky lady in X-ray, she made me so mad, that we want professionalism. So we don't want those sort of bad habits to rub off on our young, impressionable folks. So while that person may be the most experienced. You got to take a look at all of their interpersonal skills, their soft skills, and determine, is that the right person to provide that kind of mentorship. The other thing is how do you measure mentorship? You got to put timelines and kind of actions against it so that you can measure, and then you can say, yes, you've met the standard, or no, you're still not there yet. Hands-on experience is shadowing. We kind of talked about that. Dedicated biomed may volunteer to tag along. These are some lessons from my journey. We're swapping back over to imaging to CRES. First thing I had to do was decide I wanted to take the exam. Right, so I was in a position of leadership within my company. I had a lot of imaging service engineers. They didn't report to me, but I was in a position where I was kind of viewed in a leadership role. I would pump up the team talking about CRES and how great it would be if everybody could go and get it. And this is before I was certified. And many of the folks went out and got the certification, and I kind of chickened out. I hadn't truly decided that I was going to take the exam. So the exam window came and went. And if I was truly dedicated, I could have made the effort, taken the exam. But I always felt that there was an excuse. Oh, I'm too busy. I've got all these things going on. I got to travel. It's not a good time right now. We've got this customer issue going on. When you make that decision and you decide, okay, I'm going to do it, then once your brain decides, then you'll start taking the associated actions. And that starts by scheduling the exam. You pay that money, at least in my experience, my organizations that I've worked for, you pay for the exam out of pocket. They may or may not reimburse you based on the organization that you work for. Once you've paid that money, now you've got some skin in the game. That locks you in. And you got to choose how you're going to study. ACI or AMY, depending on the terminology you want to use, they offer a study program. My good friend Don Armstrong advises on and runs a study group. I don't recall if he's on the CBET study group or the CRES study group. RSTI has a course. You can do study groups in your organization, or you can just read the exam notes, like go to AMY and the how to pass this exam public document that they prepare. You can read it and it'll tell you what to study, and you can go out and independently research those topics and study it on your own. What do I recommend? I recommend a program that's administered such as ACI or RSTI. I personally took the RSTI training course, and I felt like it really prepared me. I passed the test on the first try, and that was very exciting for me. It was challenging because in my experience, it challenged some of the things that I had learned along the way and I felt to be true. What they were teaching, it didn't align with what I thought was truth. And so it was really a challenging study group, but it worked. So the day of the test, get there early, get some good night sleep the night before, limit your caffeine intake. These are all kind of like good test taking tips, and take that exam. Once you've taken the exam, get to a class like this. Come to your local HTM association and keep up your CEUs. There's other ways to keep up continuing education units, CEUs. So once you pass the exam, you're going to have to complete, I believe it's 30 CEUs in a 3-year period, okay? And some of those can be in certain categories, and some of those must be in other categories, and I don't want to quote it because I'll get it wrong. So feel free to take a look on the AMY website. But I know that you can get a vast majority, if not all, of your CEUs from classes like this, and from going to TechNation online. Just go to Google and search up TechNation and CEUs, and there's a ton of videos. Every time you watch a video, about an hour long, you get 1 CEU. At the end, you fill out a survey. Once you've submitted your survey, they'll email you your certificate of completion. The other site that can do stuff like that for you is Fluke. Go to Fluke, get CEUs by watching videos, and learn something while you're at it. It's pretty cool. Then you take those certification or certificates of completion, you upload them into AMY on the website, you upload them into your profile, and you claim all of your CEUs, and then you're good to go. So what were some of the challenges that I faced? Well, the biggest one for me, honestly, in that director role, supporting a region like a third of the country, for me, it was finding time to study. My time was a very precious commodity, and protecting it was challenging because there's a lot of demands on you for your time. Regardless of your position, we all want to work, you know, a reasonable amount of hours in the week. And this studying for CRES is something that if you're truly dedicated to, you're going to do it on your own time. When I took the class from RSTI, I took the week off. I used my PTO. So that way I wouldn't have the requirements of my job distracting me and pulling me away from it. So yeah, I used my personal time off to study for a personal goal of mine, and it benefited me professionally in the end. Finding the correct study material. Yeah, up here above where it says choose study strategies and self-study, if you go ahead and self-study, this is going to be very important. Finding the right material to study. If you're out there reading Cat in the Hat, that's not going to help prepare you for the CRES. Okay. Will I be compensated? That's actually a pretty big question. It depends on your organization. Some organizations have little to no focus on these sort of certifications. And if you want to get it, good for you. Give yourself a pat on the back. Other organizations have specified incentive policies, right? They'll give you a cash bonus. They'll give you a free day off. They'll give you $1 an hour raise as an example, right? Your mileage may vary based on the organization that you work for. I was challenged to pass the exam. I did pass it, but it was not an easy exam. Luckily, I studied and went to a course that was specifically designed to help us pass. Yeah, and so that is the success story, and those are the results. I was able to pass it. The company I worked for at the time did have an incentive program, and I was financially compensated back for the cost of taking the exam, plus I got a cash bonus, plus I got a free day off. So it was pretty good. Okay, jumping back to how to go from being a biomed to get into imaging, and then from how to be in imaging to get into a certified position where you're CRES. So when you're identifying that BMET you want to put into imaging, we went around the room and asked a couple of folks, what are some of the skills that you should have? So core clinical engineering skills, that means knowing how to behave when you're in a hospital or healthcare environment, right? Can you bring in somebody to be a biomed that's never worked in a hospital before? Yeah, sure. I don't think any biomed joined our career field and already worked in a hospital all the time. I mean, maybe some were working in the OR or whatever, but it's very few and far between. But can you bring in a car mechanic to come be a biomed? Yeah, for sure you can. They have a lot of transferable skills: electronics, mechanical, hydraulics. A lot of those skills are transferable, but they may not know how to act in the emergency room or in the operating room, right? So you got to build those core competencies in biomed or clinical engineering. They got to be skilled and detailed when it comes to preventive maintenance, right? All preventive maintenance, as recommended by the OEM, is critically important across our career field. I would argue that those high-risk devices in a hospital, it's probably even more important, right? The heart and lung machines, the anesthesia machines, what have you, infant warmers. It is important for a different reason in imaging due to the high dollar cost of repairs and the high visibility of downtime, right? Like I was talking about a little while ago, when that CT in the ER goes down, everybody knows and the pressure is on, when will it be up, okay? And the better you do your preventive maintenance, the less likely those down scenarios are to happen, okay? So you want somebody who has a focus on preventive maintenance, somebody who's good at troubleshooting and has good foundations. So imaging service engineer, typically the ones that are going out for their CRES have advanced modality knowledge. They're experienced doing higher complexity repairs. They have a increased urgency in regards to downtime. Those are a lot of skills that are really great for an imaging service engineer. And you need to explain that to your biomeds that are interested in it, right? Being a biomed, when I keep using this example, I'm going to use it again. If one infusion pump goes down and there's 600 more in the hospital, it's not a big emergency for that hospital. They will continue to find a way to continue treating patients. And when that one ER CT goes down, that urgency is through the roof and visibility as well. So what separates an ISE from somebody who's CRES? Well, the CRES certification validates their imaging experience. It gives professional recognition and can result in career growth and making more money. All right. So we just talked about a lot of this, moving from BMET to ISE. Those are two similar but still different skill sets. What do you think the work hours are for an imaging service engineer? What's the difference between an ISE and a biomed? Anybody want to take a shot at that? More dynamic. It's a great way of putting it, Kurt. Say it again. There's a lot of after hours work involved in imaging, that's right. And in the military, they have a saying like, hurry up and wait, where you like, hurry, hurry, hurry to get somewhere, and then nothing's happening, and you just gotta wait for something to happen, right? Hours of boredom and seconds of just overwhelming adrenaline. Sometimes that's how it can be for the life of an imaging service engineer. Doing routine PMs, everything's kind of 9 to 5. You get all your PMs done for the month, and surprisingly, there's nothing broken. So you kind of have some downtime. You're gonna go help your biomeds if you have the ability to, maybe work on some ultrasound, what have you. And then all of a sudden, boom, CT's down, MR's down, cath lab's down. And sometimes it's all three at once, and you're the one engineer, right? So that type of shift in work hours and expectations should definitely be explained to a prospective biomed who wants to go into imaging. So oftentimes they'll see, you know, ISEs make more money and that's what I want to do. I just want more money, or I want to be the star of the shop who can walk around like they're better than everybody else. Sometimes that's the perception. Interacting with imaging leadership. We kind of alluded to this a little bit when I was saying that somebody from outside industry comes into the HTM space and they're not exactly sure. They're used to talking to folks that are getting their car repaired, or they were in HVAC or something like that. They don't have the level of polish that can be needed when you're speaking with directors of radiology and or the C-suite of a hospital or a hospital system. It's important to know what to say, when to say anything at all, what level to speak to. I mean, if you're talking to the chief operating officer of a multi-hospital healthcare system, you don't want to be explaining, well, I checked pin 7 and I saw 5 volts. Don't you get it? They're not gonna, right? So you have to kind of coach this speaking at the correct level at the correct time. They also need to understand, and I'll say it again, urgency. And with that urgency isn't just jog in the hallway on your way there. Urgency also translates to over communicating status updates, right? Hey, I'm on site, I am troubleshooting. Send that off, whether it's text, email. You call somebody in and talk to them in person, say, go tell the rad director this. And then within the next hour, you send another update. Hey, I'm still troubleshooting. I'm really struggling to find what the problem is. Or, hey, I've identified that this needs a part. I'm researching getting you that part right now. The next one, I've got the part on order. It'll be here overnight. We've got an airplane flight. It's going on the next flight out. That over communication is key. And then managing contracts. You have a lot of biomeds in your facilities that manage any kind of a service contract. Is it part of their job typically? No, I'm seeing a lot of head shaking. No, maybe some, maybe not a huge part of. Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. Response times and understanding the contract, but I think when you become an ISC, there's a little more emphasis on understanding those contracts, those imaging service, maybe backup contracts. Maybe you have a shared services agreement with the OEM. You went to school and now you're trained on, I'm just pulling different devices out of my hat here, Philips Cath Lab. And now you've partnered with Philips and said, hey, I'm factory trained. I can do first response, troubleshoot it, validate with Philips that I've got the right part selected, and then we can ship the part. Then we don't have to wait for Philips to send an engineer out. So it's beneficial to the customer. It's also beneficial to the OEM because now they can take that resource that they were going to have to dispatch and they can utilize them elsewhere in the region. The next part here talks about the value of specialization. It says not so much a master of all. When I was in, I'll just speak for myself. When I was in biomed, turning a wrench on medical equipment, I became sort of a master of all, expert of none, right? I worked on everything from dental equipment, veterinarian equipment, infusion pumps, hospital beds, defibrillators, ventilators, you name it. If it was in a hospital, I worked on it. When you transition into imaging, you're typically going to specialize in 1, 2, or 3 modalities, at least for the first several years as an imaging service engineer. If you make that transition to being an imaging service engineer that is an expert, if you will, on all of the modalities, typically you've got 30, 40 years in the career field. If you're able to work autonomously on, you're the expert for ultrasound, portables, C-arms, X-ray rooms, fluoro, cath lab, CT, MR. I won't even say Linacs, but typically you're going to have 1 or 2 of those, sometimes 3. And typically those get divided down into which OEM you're best at. Okay. Okay. How do you bridge the gap from general biomed to imaging? This is almost redundant. We talked about a lot of this stuff already. We want BMET that have the aptitude aligning with the skills needed in imaging. Consider the workload, time, cost requirement to attend training. So that is called service planning, that second bullet right there. That's service planning where you've got to determine the support strategy for your imaging fleet at your facility or facilities that you support. One of the common phrases that I like to use is the juice worth the squeeze, right? Aside of the workload, the time and cost requirements to send them to training, what tools and test equipment are required to perform the services, right? And what are the costs for that tool set and test equipment? Okay. You got to weigh those training options, which we've talked about what those training options are. Develop a formalized training path. Talked about that as well. Put a timeline to it, okay? Hey, BMET 2, super motivated person. We've heard you when you say you want to move to imaging. Let's sit down for your quarterly check-in, whatever have you, and let's talk about a plan that I'm coming up with. And I'll tell you what I've come up with as your manager. And you give me feedback on what, if you think that sounds reasonable, and let's co-author this plan. Okay. I think that our first step is to send you to RSTI phase 1. When you come back, we're going to pair you up with Jimmy, and we're going to have you start doing PMs in the imaging lab. And in next quarter, we're going to reassess and see, have you learned some of the skills that you need to? Are you ready to go to RSTI phase 2? Are you ready to take on some of these things on your own? So make it measurable, make it time-based, and you'll make it successful. And then by tracking the development, that's how you make that successful. I just talked about reassessing. So reassessing on this slide is talking about when you get a brand new cath lab, and there is no, cath lab just as an example, there is no market in the third-party world for training because it's brand new to market, okay? Let's say Siemens comes out with a brand new cath lab that nobody's seen before. You're not gonna be able to go get training at All Parts or DirectMed, Tri-Imaging now, or RSTI or any of these places because they don't have a physical system in their inventory to train you on. And they don't have the training themselves to provide you the training. So you'll be in a scenario where only the OEM can provide that training. As that equipment enters the facility, that's your time during capital planning to assess what's my service strategy going to be. Are we going to take care of this ourselves, send somebody training? We're going to bring in ISO, OEM, whatever. Okay. This slide talks about why it's valuable or what the value is to transition a career from biomed into imaging or from anywhere into imaging. There's a lot of channels for growth in imaging. You'll end up with a unique skill set that travels well and opportunities for specialization. When it says unique skill set that travels well, it means anywhere you go in the country, they're in need right now. Imaging service engineers are in demand. So it's worth your while. Opportunities for specialization, I think we touched on that where I said typically folks will get specialized in 1, 2, sometimes 3 modalities, and oftentimes more specialized down to specific OEMs. As we talked about earlier, ISEs are aging out at an alarming rate. There's opportunities to work as an imaging service engineer in your own hospital facility, healthcare facility, with an ISO third party, independent service organization, or for the OEM. And the ISEs in this space, they transition quite frequently between the 3. And I think that's a great thing. An ISE that works at an ISO who previously worked at the OEM brings with them a wealth of knowledge and experience and OEM training to that space. The other value here is compensation. ISE comp is typically more than general biomed, and advancement opportunities. So because of the sheer number of biomeds in the shop, they might have, I don't know, I'm just gonna pick a random biomed shop that has 10 biomeds and 1 ISE. All of those folks, if they're looking for career progression and they don't want to leave the organization, there's typically 1 or 2 positions that represent advancement, right? Become the shop supervisor, if you want to call it that, or become the manager of the biomed department, the director of HTM, clinical engineering director, whatever terms apply. So you get competed out as imaging compared to biomeds if you're just trying to grow in an in-shop situation like that. When you take a look at ISOs and OEMs, you're only competing against other imaging service engineers for promotion into imaging leadership roles, right? I would consider my role today being an imaging leadership role. Other folks that want to be in this position are typically imaging service engineers that show the aptitude for management or being a director. Okay. So this is the slide I want you guys to pay attention to for taking back to your organization. Some of you may be the person that makes these, takes these actions and makes these decisions. Some of you may not, but in any case, maybe take a picture of the slide or take some notes. I think organizations can support these transitions by encourage training. Organizations need to encourage training. If you work at an organization that says we don't want to invest in training our folks, maybe have a discussion with them and ask them why not, right? Maybe there's real drivers that are preventing that sort of behavior. Maybe they just simply don't understand the value that having a more trained staff can, how it can help position the healthcare facility to be more profitable. Maybe they only see it as a cost and not as a revenue generator when we are then keeping the CT from going down, okay? Internal training, on-the-job training, you don't always have to spend money to send somebody out to training. Career pathing and mentorship. Mentors are a big deal. The mentor is going to teach that former auto mechanic not to call Becky in radiology the B word, right? And they're also going to talk to them about how to capture accurate documentation in the service event or the work order inside within the CMMS. Those things are critical. It gets more critical when major components are replaced and documentation has to be submitted to the FDA And the health physicist comes in to take a look at that mammo repair that you did. And did you document that you upgraded the software from version 1 to version 1.001? If you didn't, it's going to be a problem. Mentors know this stuff, and they're very critical in this process. And then also finding the career path that suits the individual. Just because the organization has a need for an imaging service engineer that can work on, I'll pick a modality, MRI, doesn't mean that that individual that you've selected, they have a lot of the right skills for it, but it doesn't mean that they're the right fit for the job. Maybe they've got a pacemaker and they can't go into the MRI scan bay, et cetera, et cetera. Find a career path that suits the individual. And that's part of planning. Here's some retention strategies. Trained staff are going to stay longer, and those types of opportunities help retention. If your shop understands, hey, people are getting sent to training all the time. Yeah, I just got a job offer across the city at this other healthcare facility, but they don't ever train their folks. Yeah, I'm going to make $1 more an hour. I think I'd rather stick it out here where I know I'm going to get some training. Supporting career goals. An invested manager reaps benefits on those investments. Right? So these are some things that I think we need to do for the future. We need to identify possible imaging leaders, folks, I say this with no big head, but folks like me that come from maybe biomed, maybe done some imaging and have the adaptability and the aptitude to move into leadership type roles and put down their toolbox and be able to focus and function in more of a business setting, taking a look at profit and loss, taking a look at a lot of different things. We need to identify those folks now, right? And we need to start them on a career path that can lead them into those positions. Mentoring and leading, I've beat that horse to death. Speaking at conferences and schools. Show of hands, has anybody in here ever done this, what I'm doing right now, standing up in front of a bunch of strangers and talking before? Yeah, it looks like about half the class has, so I'm so happy, thank you guys. Keep that up and also encourage your teams to do the same. A lot of folks are going to be way too shy or petrified or think, hey, I'm not smart enough or I'm not the expert to get up there. How do I know that? That's exactly what I thought. And I had a mentor of mine develop me and push me and say, I've signed you up to go give a class. And now I'm on the spot, right? So I got to develop a class and go out and do it. And that was years ago, and I've done several of these since. And I encourage you guys to encourage your teams to do the same. Strengthening the HTM workforce. HTM and ISEs should bridge gaps and spend time together. I hate the idea that imaging service engineers are prima donnas who walk around the shop like they think they're better than everybody. My time's more valuable than yours. The work I do is more important than yours. I hate it. I discourage it anytime I see it. I think that we are a team in this industry and we should support and defend each other. Creating a culture of excellence. I think that goes without saying. If you incorporate everything that we've talked about and all of the wonderful things that you already have going on in your own organizations, you will have a culture of excellence. So these are some resources as we get close to time to wrap up at the end of this presentation. I'm going to leave these up on the screen for a few minutes. Let me go to the next slide. Yeah, I'm going to leave. I just want to make sure I have enough time. Did I get you?
Got it.
I want to leave these up on the screen for a few minutes and just kind of talk through them. So I talked a lot about AMI. This is their website, AMI.org, ACertified.org, acertified.org, right? So that's where you can go to find the courses I talked to you about where Don Armstrong offers or is on the board that develops and offers the official AMI study guides. They're great. How are you going to get a better study guide than going to the source of the exam and getting it from them? We talked about imaging skills and training portals like RSTI was a big topic today. It got called out by an audience member. And yes, this is their website. They do have imaging fundamentals that come in phases, phase 1, 2, 3, there might be a phase 4 now. And they also have modality specific courses. Each OEM offers training If the individual qualifies, I didn't put the portal links up here for you because you can, for one, they can often change. Two, you just go to Google and you type in official GE healthcare training or OEC 9900 and you'll find it. It'll be in the first couple of links. For independent service organizations, I did list several of them out, but this is by no means a comprehensive, all-encompassing list. Some of the large ones up there, All Parts Medical, Probo, Avante Block Imaging, DirectMed, which is now Tri-Imaging. There's many more. Okay, so check those out. They typically publish a calendar for the entire year, and you can go out there and see the specific device you're looking to get training on, and then look over to the right, and it'll show you when it's going to be in the year. And if you do this proactively once or twice a year, you'll be able to program ahead of the need and get your folks to that training before it's an emergency. Self-study and professional development. Amy has e-learning and webinars. You just go on their site and you can find that. Local HTM chapters like the lovely AZ HTM here in Scottsdale, Arizona today, hosting the HTM Mixer. We're grateful for that partnership. Study groups could be through your local chapter, or it could be through your organization, or it could be across your, you could have a friend in Ohio and you live in Utah and you guys talk to each other and form a little study group. It's a wonderful world we live in where you don't have to ride a horse across the country to get information from one spot to the next. Structured OJT with defined milestones. I think I've really talked about that a lot. You got to have a plan. It's got to be time-based if you want it to be as good as it can be. So these are the clear key takeaways. There's a clear pathway from BMET to imaging service engineer, eventually to CRES. That development requires planning, structure, support, and follow-up. And it's on us, the folks in this room, the folks in this career field, to help the leadership of healthcare organizations or independent service organizations or original equipment manufacturers to understand the benefit that they're going to reap from investing in training and development of their staff. I see far too often. Say it again? Yeah, I see it far too often where it's like, well, if we send people to training, that's going to cost us money. But they don't understand the ROI. And it's on us to help them understand it.